Thank you for joining me for another podcast of the Divorce and Separation Coach. I'm delighted to welcome Claire Wood. She'll answer my questions on how to find the right family lawyer for your divorce and to understand the services you can expect. Claire is a legal director at Kingsley Napley, an internationally recognized law firm based in London. She speaks both French and English and has a significant Anglo-French family law practice. She has over 15 years' experience in supporting clients through cross-border divorce or separation, advising on financial settlements and prenuptial agreements, and the relocation of children. She's passionate about family justice and ensuring clients have the best possible support when going through a divorce or separation. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Claire.
Good to see you, Chloe. Thanks for having me.
Should we dive right in?
Let's do it.
Great. So as I mentioned earlier, you're joining us today to share your advice and your insights on selecting the right family lawyer. So in your experience, what are the main things our listeners should consider when deciding on a family lawyer?
Okay, so to begin with, have a look online, read through their profile, have a look at their client testimonials. So what have previous clients said about them? Check their expertise, their experience, and then speak to them, have a chat. Most lawyers will be very happy to have a short conversation with a potential client without charge before a formal meeting. So do that, pick up the phone, have a chat to a few lawyers. Do you like their approach? Have they got the sort of empathy side, but also the steeliness that might be needed? Are they going to be efficient? Will they be caring? What are you looking for in a divorce lawyer? And do they meet those expectations? I would say, crucially, has that lawyer got the experience of cases like yours? So ask them, do you have experience of this sort of case? And make sure they can give you a really good roadmap to get things resolved. I also say to clients, it's important to think about what kind of divorce you want, what sort of divorce is likely, given the personality of your spouse. So is the lawyer you're speaking to really litigious? Or do they practice and encourage forms of alternative dispute resolution, ADR? So are they mediators? Do they practice collaborative law? Do they negotiate? Are they lawyers who want to resolve a case rather than going to court? And I think it's important to make sure the lawyer has a big tool bag, so lots of options for you so that you can decide at certain stages in the process what kind of approach to take and what route to take. One thing that you don't necessarily think about at the beginning, if you're not used to working with lawyers, is the communication. So what's that lawyer's sort of estimated time for coming back to you, for returning calls and emails? Some firms now do have a client service agreement. So there's a stipulated time in which they should be coming back to you. An important thing to think about there is who's in the team. So it's not just the one lawyer, it's perhaps who else is in the team. Is there a partner and an associate? Because lawyers are in court, so they're often in meetings or in court, so they might not be able to come back to you immediately. But if there's more than one person in the team, then they should be able to come back to you in a good timescale. So yeah, approaching divorce in the right way, choosing the right lawyer, really can help reduce conflict. It can streamline the process. And I think when you're searching for the lawyer, just remember you're the client. You can shop around, you can speak to a few lawyers and work out the best fit for you. How about with a coach, Chloe? Is it a similar thing to find a divorce coach?
I think I'd pick up on a lot of the things you mentioned. So, understanding their niche and if it's relevant to your situation. I'd, of course, look into their fees, but also look if they've been recommended. If you can get recommendations from friends who've had experience with that coach, that's always an added plus. There's a couple of things I think that are specific to coaching. First of all, their personal experience of divorce. While being divorced does not automatically make you a good divorce coach, having somebody who has the experience of a divorce that is similar to yours or that has some similarities is usually a good way to go. And most importantly, checking their certification. There's a lot of people out there that call themselves divorce coaches who aren't, officially trained or certified. So make sure that you're dealing with a certified coach. The last thing is really just, I guess, the same as with a lawyer, making sure you're comfortable with that person, have a chat with them. If they speak your language, that might be a bonus. But just
Yeah.
make sure that you're with somebody that doesn't make you feel judged or shamed, and who's just going to be there to support you, who makes you feel at ease.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's an added point, isn't there, for international clients? So has the lawyer, the coach got experience of that particular jurisdiction? Do they speak a foreign language?
Yes.
Or does someone in the team speak a foreign language? Because it's certainly an important factor for reading documents. If you've
Mhm.
got lots of French documents or German documents, can the lawyer read them? And do they have experience of the foreign jurisdiction? So do they have
Yeah.
experience both of obviously the English jurisdiction, but also what might happen as a comparative in that foreign jurisdiction? Just a sort of added point for international clients.
I agree. I agree. So there's something else I wanted to ask you, Claire. So a lot of my clients have misconceptions as to what they can expect from their lawyer and where their support ends. Can you please explain to us what exactly a divorce lawyer does and what you don't do?
Yeah, absolutely. So English lawyers are pretty expensive. They tend to charge on an hourly basis for the time that they spend on your behalf. And the lawyer is really there to give you legal guidance and a strategy to help
Mhm.
achieve your aims, to resolve the case. And it's important to remember, as the client, you are the one making the decisions. Your lawyer really should be giving you the options and tell you the potential outcomes and the consequences of each of those options, but you are the decision maker.
Yeah.
And a lawyer will of course support the client from the initial decision making at the outset of the relationship until the end of the case, until it's been resolved completely. So
Mhm.
until there's either a financial consent order that's been implemented in financial cases, or in children cases where there's a final order or a parenting agreement.
Yeah.
But I think one of the crucial things for a lawyer is to signpost the client to other professionals who can help them, so who can support them. Therapy is one aspect of this. So if the client really does need that additional support, to make sure they're signposted to a therapist. Obviously, financial advisors, if there's a financial settlement involved. So post-divorce, they will get support and assistance from a financial advisor. And of course, the divorce coach, who can really supplement the role of the lawyer and help clients to get the support that they need. I think in terms of expectations, Chloe, lawyers really, so a good lawyer should give you realistic advice.
Yeah.
As we know, family law in England is really discretionary. It's not absolutely set in stone. The law is based on statute and case law interpretation, and there's not one set outcome. So it's quite difficult often for French clients in particular to understand that we don't have the concept of matrimonial regime. So it is not
Yeah.
as set in stone. The outcome is not as set in stone as it would be if the divorce were to proceed in France. So I think setting expectations, if you go to a lawyer who really offers you the earth, who tells you you're going to get absolutely everything you want, you've got to question that, because it's not usually the right way and the right outcome.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. And I think it's great for people to understand that as they build their divorce team and they enter into this process, to understand the different skill sets that different professionals can bring to the table, really. So now,
Absolutely.
Claire, as a lawyer, I'm sure that you're used to people being concerned about legal expenses. So I will dive into that topic. I think we all agree that you shouldn't select a lawyer entirely based on fees. That is definitely a clear piece of advice here. But are there any other tips that you can share with regards to keeping legal fees lower?
Yes, so many tips. I would say a good lawyer, a good divorce lawyer, just does not like to see clients spending more than they need to on fees. Think about, as I said before, how you work together from the outset, and set expectations at the outset as to how you'll work together. I've got some tips based on experience that can keep a case on track and on budget. I think your starting point is important. You start with a really good summary. So prepare really well for that first meeting.
Yeah.
Set out a full summary of your finances, your assets, income, spending. If it's a children case, give the lawyer as much information as possible about your children, because what's best for the children is going to be very much at the heart of the discussions about their future. So talk to me about them. How old are they? Where do they live? Where do they go to school? What are their relationships like with you and your partner? And we can get a sense then of what matters most for them.
Yeah.
So and keep nothing back, is the other thing. Honesty is absolutely the best policy. When we say tell us everything, we really mean tell us everything. It's difficult. It's really difficult, that first meeting, for clients. It's a big emotional burden for them often to come in and tell us everything, and to go through potentially 15, 20 years of history. But it is important that we have all the background information. We really do build the best case by knowing exactly what we're facing. And there's no point in spending lots of money on a first meeting if you haven't divulged everything and told us everything. I know it's daunting, but we are definitely on your side. And what we discuss is confidential and privileged. So tell us everything. The second tip I would say is to think about the whole team. So at Kingsley Napley, each case will have one senior lawyer or partner and one more junior solicitor, an associate solicitor. And this is intended to keep costs down, to make sure that you don't have the lawyer with 20, 30 years experience drafting the divorce application. That just does not make sense. So it isn't only the hourly rate question that's the important thing, it's who's in that team, what activity is being done at what cost. Because there are lots of activities and lots of tasks that a junior lawyer can do, or a paralegal, at a lower cost. So it's important to be aware of that. You're not always going to be speaking to the partner on a case. It would just not be cost efficient. The partner and the senior lawyer is really there to think about strategy, to add value to the case, not to do all of the work on it.
Yeah.
And I think we at KN, we're really keen to ensure that the client has all the support they need, because that will help costs.
Yeah,
so not just the legal side. Clients need to speak to therapists, to financial advisors, and I really do encourage the non-legal support in the form of a divorce coach or whoever it is supporting the client, so that costs can you make sure you're making the most of the lawyer and the time with the lawyer, being aware of what their role is.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point around preparing for meetings, and that's exactly what I do with a lot of my clients, is trying to get their thoughts aligned and their ducks in a row before those meetings, so that they can come and make the best of that time, that usually quite expensive time.
Absolutely, exactly that. One thing we already talked about, we touched on, is the communication point, Chloe. So time is money, sadly, with lawyers. Many people have never used lawyers before, and they don't know that each email that's sent, each letter that's sent, each phone call costs money. All of that costs money. So I think it's having that conversation at the beginning, as we've said, about how to communicate. Do you like to have everything in writing? Do you want it all on email so you can reflect on it and read it through again? Fine. And that's how we will communicate. Or do you like to talk things through to make sense of them? Is that the way you approach things? And you'll probably speak more than you write then, if the client will prefer phone calls. Of course, clients like a mix of both. There's some occasions when it's best to have a quick call, or better to send a quick email, and we'll work that around what the client wants. But I think that is an important factor when thinking about costs as well, because that's often where costs are racked up, in the time communicating with the client and explaining things.
Yeah, I completely agree. As a coach, I think, one of the obvious pieces of advice is always to try and resolve things amicably, right? I'm always telling people, if you can keep your case out of court, you will save yourself grief, you will save yourself money, and you will save on the destruction of your family. You will have a much better outcome in terms of where you're standing in your communication with your ex at the end of it all. So I think that's always, an important thing for people to be aware of, that going to court isn't necessarily the right way forward, and that it does have a cost beyond the financial cost. And then the other thing is really, how to prepare for each step of the divorce process. So you mentioned preparing for meetings, but also just thinking about what your divorce objectives are, doing a budget for the divorce itself and for your life after, having a clear position in terms of what you want to negotiate and what you don't want to negotiate, and then just having the right team around you, right? I think that comes back to what
Absolutely.
you were saying earlier, having the right people with the right advice helping you drive your divorce in the direction you've set for it, rather than improvising as you go.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, you've touched on it there, but ADR, alternative dispute resolution, some cases can't stay out of court. They have to go to court,
Yeah.
or they have to start in court, and then they can come out and try the other options for resolution. But, you know, in any first meeting, we will be explaining to a client that there is not just one option. There are lots of ways of resolving a divorce. Mediation is absolutely fantastic for some clients, where you keep it in your control. So you are in mediation with a third-party mediator who will facilitate the discussions.
Yeah.
And you know, it is a really great way for clients to keep control of the process, to make their own decisions, often with the support of a lawyer in the background. You know, it's not like you go to one session of mediation and it is all done. You know, it does take time and investment, but it is a really good way for clients to enable themselves to make the decisions and very much firmly keep it within their control.
Yeah.
Collaborative law, also fantastic, a similar way of resolving, but with lawyers involved. And in the collaborative process, you will commit to not going to court with that lawyer.
Yeah.
So that is a real investment in non-court resolution. But then there's all sorts of other things. We've got negotiation. You know, most lawyers will be able to negotiate.
Yeah.
You know, not just have to issue applications and have a judge decide. They will be able to negotiate for you and find strategies to get the other side to engage in negotiations
Yeah.
and roundtable meetings. And as you've said, it's all intended to avoid the court process, which is a very blunt tool. You know, it can be a very traumatic experience for clients. It's not great. You know, the process is very slow. It can be very costly. And, you know, some people have no option but to go to court. That's true. But if you do have options, you know, I would encourage clients to really think around what is most suited to you, your situation and your spouse, and how they will look at things.
I completely agree. And so what would you say to people who aren't happy with their legal representation? You know, if they're thinking of changing lawyers halfway through, what would your recommendation be?
Yeah, so it's always a difficult one, isn't it? But many clients do find themselves in that situation, either through choice, because the communication is broken down, or because a lawyer leaves the firm or goes on mat leave or whatever it is. And I would say the team aspect's important here. You know, thinking about not just jumping from one firm to another. It could cost quite a lot of money to change if you're, you know, deep into litigation, or the case is very complex and lots of disclosures happened. It could cost a lot of money to change over. So think it through carefully. I go back to what I said initially. You can always have a chat with that lawyer to begin with. You don't have to immediately change. You know, you can have a cost-free conversation with somebody else, and see if the fit is just a bit better. Obviously, if you're not getting a good service from your lawyer, the relationship's broken down, it may be better to change, to find a lawyer who will be committed to resolving the case efficiently and prioritising it. But I think it's not, you know, lawyers have to give difficult advice a lot of the time, and so just because they've you know said one thing that you didn't like, don't think about jumping immediately, and just take your time in then, if you do change, in then choosing the next lawyer.
Yeah, it sounds like something you want to consider carefully. It might be the right decision, but it's not one to take lightly. I
Absolutely,
completely understand
yeah.
your point. So my last question, Claire, is really kind of flipping things on their head. For you as a family lawyer, what does the ideal client look like?
Yeah, Chloe, I mean, all clients are so different. They have different goals and aims.
Yeah.
Some are very used to interacting with lawyers. They understand how it works. Some have never had to deal with a lawyer before. And I think as a good lawyer has to adapt themselves to all of those different personalities and their individual needs. But for me, a client who is who is willing to communicate with their ex, is a positive. You know, if they can make sensible decisions with their partner, that's a breath of fresh air. You know, the more that you can take out of the arena of the lawyer and keep between you, the better, if that's possible. I'm not a lawyer who is going to try and interfere with that relationship, impede that ongoing relationship, because if they have children, they're going to have to communicate into the future when the lawyers are well out of the picture. I think clients who are able to sort of take the advice and weigh it up and really make decisions on advice, that's always helpful. And I think I like clients who are honest with me, who say, you know what, Claire, this isn't really working. Let's think about, can we think about a different way of doing it? It's a two-way conversation. It's not just me telling you. It's definitely, the communication between the two of you. I like clients who give me feedback and say, what about this, Claire? That is always a positive. I think there's also an aspect of disclosure if you are in a financial process. So if the finances are to be resolved within the divorce, in terms of the disclosure process, the Form E, there's a lot that a client can do to help the lawyer with that. And from a client perspective, I would say make sure your lawyer's given you a timeline. So a really good, these are the steps, these are the sorts of timescales we're looking at. That is going to be a really helpful thing for lawyer and client to come back to, as just a sort of setting out the expectations again from the start of the case, and knowing what we're all supposed to be doing and when.
I completely agree, and I think that's exactly where the work that I do with my clients helps a lot. Is really getting them organized, having clearer views on what their desired divorce outcomes are, and coming to the table to you as a credible interface and somebody who has a clear plan and clear instructions for you.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. But I want to thank you once more, Claire, for coming today. It was really helpful to hear your insights. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Chloe. It's been really great, and can't wait to speak to you again.
Thank you. And I want to thank all our listeners as well, and wish everybody a great day.